We have a kind of interview style with Rob Cartolano, who is Associate Vice President for Technology and Preservation at Columbia University Libraries. So Rob, if you had your camera on earlier, can you put your camera on? Not quite sure. We're having issues with Zoom.
Thanks, Todd. Yeah, when I try, it says that I can't start the video. So
yeah.
Bear with me. I'll try and see if I can change it.
Oh, thanks.
Something's gone amiss with our Zoom. It was working fine a while ago, and
you could make me a host. See if that works.
Yes. Why don't we try that? I can't make you a host because I'm not the host. I don't have the power. So while we're trying to get your camera on, let's get, look at that. Technology, it works sometimes.
All right. All right.
So based on the conversations that we had today, kind of interesting, wide-ranging conversations about the book ecosystem, how would you characterize that in the academic environment? Where do we stand? Is it working? Is it horribly failing? Where do we, how good or bad is it?
Great question. First, let me thank you, Todd and Jill, for organizing today's session and for inviting us to speak with you all today. So we know there's a lot of challenges in the academic environment, in particular, the ebook environment for academic institutions is particularly fragmented with many, many different vendors. As an example, talking to my colleagues, our colleagues at New York Public Library, for the most part, they have 4 ebook providers. They have 4 vendors. I looked today at our system, and we have 1,729 database vendors, and several hundred of them are ebook providers. So we have hundreds of ebook providers. So the idea of having a single platform, a single aggregator, a single way to bring it all together is non-existent for academic institutions. We have to work in a very complex environment that's likely to stay complex for good reasons. We're research institutions, and we want to support bibliodiversity, including global bibliodiversity. And so it's important to recognize the environment is fragmented and will continue to be fragmented. Tom Bruno mentioned earlier, the user experience, and he epitomizes it by saying there's too many clicks. It's too hard to get to the material. And we really have to look at the user experience front and center. They're not getting a great user experience. And Jay mentioned it as well in his conversation with trying to improve discovery and accessibility. These inconsistencies across the different platforms and in the systems themselves create many user challenges that turns people away from using ebooks. Christina mentioned reporting challenges, usage data issues, privacy challenges, issues of consistent login, we see as a challenge. And Jenny mentioned one of my favorite terms, which is intentional friction. The concept that we might actually be introducing intentional friction that dissuades people from using ebooks. And whether that's through licensing, technology, or collections, somehow there is intentional friction underway. And I won't say who creates that friction, but there is friction. Steve discussed DRM as a challenge, and that DeGorda did a lot of work with 5 years of work really a great example of a lot of effort by one company to try to solve this problem for a number of presses. But I don't think that DRM is bad. I think bad DRM is bad. And we define bad DRM, or I would define bad DRM as proprietary DRM that is controlled by one corporation or entity that could then withdraw access to things that you acquire. And Jenny mentions licensing versus purchase, and there's probably larger issues there as well. But at the same time, I see many opportunities in this academic ecosystem to actually grow the overall academic ebook market, to benefit libraries, to benefit ebook providers, but most importantly, to benefit our users, our students, our faculty, our scholars, the actual users and readers of these ebooks. And we've seen millions of dollars of funding from IMLS, Sloan, Mellon, and international funding as well, and now Knight and Arcadia, along with support from institutions like the New York Public Library, the Digital Public Library of America, Minitex, Amigos. And as a result, an open ecosystem is emerging that might have the potential to transform the academic ebook experience. Most recently, I'm excited to see $12.5 million from the Arcadia Foundation to fund the New York Public Library's effort to, quote unquote, improve patrons' ability to discover, request, and access in digital format a copy of almost any book through its online platform. And the Knight Foundation's $5 million grant to Lyricists for the Palace Project to, quote, develop and scale a robust suite of content, services, and tools for the delivery of ebooks, audiobooks, and other digital media to benefit public libraries and patrons. So these are efforts that are underway that I think are promising, and why I have hope for addressing some of these challenges that we were heard earlier by some of our speakers and that we know exist.
Yeah, it's not exactly greenfield any longer. Maybe it was 10 or 15 years ago, but it's certainly an area that is ripe for growth and development. Maybe turn the greenfield into a nice, well-curated garden. What are some of the requirements that are unique to the academic reading experience with regard to ebooks that make our community different and distinct from, say, New York Public Library, where they have 4 platforms? Yep. Maybe that's just because there are 4 mass market publishers now.
Yeah, you know, a lot of what concerns higher education readers concerns the consumer marketplace and consumes public libraries. But there are differences. And back in 2019, we received some funding from the Alfred P. Sloan Foundation to conduct a survey, and we got feedback from over 100 academic libraries. This survey was put together by Columbia University and Lyricists. My colleague James English at Lyricists and I put this together, and we learned that you know, there are some requirements that are the same. So, for example, a great ebook reader continues to be something that people talk about in the most general sense. What James would call table stakes for a great reading experience to start with a great reader. Support for the entire book download, not just a chapter, and the ability for offline book reading is important. Some folks in higher ed will say, well, you know what, people only read chapter by chapter. Well, that might be true, but people also read the entire book. And having the flexibility means that getting the whole book first and then being able to go to it chapter by chapter is a secondary benefit. But we see different reasons for reading the entire book, including offline book reading, as very important. Things like a table of contents, bookmark, and page synchronization across devices. Again, these are things that we think all libraries, all readers, consumer marketplace, public libraries, and academic libraries need. In addition, though, higher education, we saw demand for copy, paste, and print. You need to be able to copy out the content to be able to paste it into your work, your research, note taking, and be able to. What I would say is, in addition to that, be able to annotate and provide note taking around the document. You know, if we think about a scholar working with a book, they might not work with that book for 3 or 4 weeks, or 3 or 4 months, or 3 or 4 years. That book could be a resource for them for 3 or 4 decades. And how to have portable annotation and note-taking that comes along with them, that is trusted and usable for them over their career, is really important. And that requires some effort. In-document keyword search, good search within the document is important. And citation creation and export, the ability to create citations and easily export those into citation management tools like Zotero and EndNote. We also participated in work with JSTOR on a project called Reimagining the Monograph. And we had a study with particular student and faculty user stories, personas. Of course, that really documented the use of the book as a data source itself, almost like the lab for some students and faculty. That's their data source, with deep analysis, notes, and citations part of that work. And really a different way of looking at the book from an end-to-end reading experience, really looking at the book as a data source. And so that Reimagining the Monograph study, I think, could be a good way to look at how we might draw upon the user personas in higher education, how they differ from public libraries and from the consumer marketplace. And we can see more could be done in that area.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've been involved and a vocal supporter of the Simply E reading app, and you piloted that at Columbia. How did that go? Could you provide some like real world information about how it's been going?
Yeah, I mean, we have to give a lot of credit to New York Public Library and IMLS for funding the Library Simplified project. And they really took the lead in trying to address how to improve the reading experience for public libraries. And for me, rather than try to build something new and fresh, how do we leverage what was already successful for public libraries? And so we adopted the Simply E app as the way we would try this out. And I would say Simply E is an application, not the application. In the same way that Chrome is a web browser or Safari is a web browser, it's not the web browser. So Simply E is just a choice that we happen to make. Others might make different choices. But we did adopt Simply E and open ebook technologies, working with New York Public Library and with Lyrasis, because Lyrasis provided us with development and hosting services, so which was terrific. We branded it as Columbia University Libraries. As opposed to being a vendor branded product, it's Columbia University Libraries branded. I think the library is the brand, and that's an important aspect for us. We deployed this after testing in February 2021. We put books that included licensed ebooks, books that we digitized from our special collections, as was mentioned by Tom, things before 1926, as well as open access books. And we put all of those in. So we wanted to have it, be inclusive of licensed, open access, and digital collections, things that we digitized from our collections, in this case, pre-26 books. And we got great feedback. We surveyed students and faculty. We got from 400 students, 80% of the students were favorable to the use of Simply E, and they cited the convenience of having books from various vendors in one simplified interface, with an 80% favorability there. And 82% had a good or excellent experience with Simply E, the app itself. And of those students we surveyed, 85% of them were actually using ebooks in one or more of their courses. So the early results are very, very positive, and we're very excited to expand it. Our next steps are to really step up the number of books that are in the system. So we're working with university presses, with some of the aggregators and the ebook providers to add up to 500,000 ebooks into the system for this coming academic year. And our goal is to get 1 million ebooks into the system by December 2022. So we worked with Johns Hopkins Press, a great partner. We've been engaged with MIT Press and Columbia University Press, of course, home team. But we're also working with ProQuest and Springer and EBSCO. ProQuest did a great work with New York University in their rollout in the spring, and they're going to work with us as well. And we're in conversations with De Gruyter, with Steve's team. So hi, Steve. And of course, we have a good relationship with Taylor and Francis and other providers as well. So our goal is to just get the books in there so that we can get the usage. And once we have more books in there, we're going to do a more detailed user assessment of students and faculty in the winter of 2022.
And as you're working with those publishers to get the content into your Simply E instance, have you run into any barriers in implementation on the publisher side?
Yeah.
So something that we could maybe streamline.
Well, there are definitely barriers, but I would say that they've been very receptive. I think there's a willingness to work with us. We've had a positive experience working with Springer and ProQuest just now. EBSCO is committing to doing some work for us for the fall. For example, Springer actually modified their APIs that let us extract information about our books and specifically to support Library Simplified and this platform for Simply E. ProQuest has generated an important data standard called OPDS, which I could talk a little bit about, the Open Publication distribution system, OPDS, which now that has been done, will work. They did it for NYU, and now we'll be able to leverage that. And EBSCO is working as well to make their platform work with us for the fall. So yeah, the vendors have been willing to work with us. I think the challenge is it's the chicken and egg situation. As was mentioned earlier, the vendors are working with their margins and have to make profits. Library adoption hasn't happened yet. So I'm trying to help facilitate at a national level some adoption by libraries that would make the vendors feel like it's okay to start trying it out. And once we get a couple of vendors to try it out, so once we have Springer and ProQuest and EBSCO, then libraries might see, oh, well, I could see myself trying this out. And it starts to build a virtuous cycle for adoption and transition.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I believe publishers and aggregators face the same challenges we have in the libraries, which is for every dollar that we spend on duplicative technologies and platforms, that's a dollar that we're not spending on actually buying content, on buying collections, on buying titles. So vendors, we'll have more money as libraries to spend on buying their content if we don't have to buy duplicative platforms from them. And the vendors won't have to build duplicative content. As it is today, vendors don't build custom web browsers, right? They leverage web browsers that are built by somebody else. They leverage Chrome and Firefox and Safari. So if they can avoid building a book reader or other duplicative technologies, they benefit as well, and they can focus on what they do best. And I think this would be beneficial for all of us. And I think that's the spirit of the conversation that we've had with them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's the benefit of standards is if these vendors, these publishers go through the effort of working with you and your Simply E system, ideally, they won't have to do the same thing every institution that wants a reading platform, and do it once, implement it 1,000 times, everyone benefits.
That's right. That's right. That is definitely the hope. And I think that, again, I mentioned earlier, the W3C, there is a great effort on the EPUB standard. We think that's really very promising. It's built in, accessibility is baked into that standard. So, baked into that standard is the ability to do machine-to-machine data analysis, because it's structured metadata at the end of the day. It's HTML. There's ability for us to have it work with a variety of reading platforms on a variety of devices, like smartphones or tablets or laptops or large screens. So there are emergent and existing interoperable standards that we already can leverage. And there may be some work we can do to tune them around the edges that might give us a lot more capability. And OPDS is a great example. OPDS was developed by the industry, and New York Public Library enhanced it a little bit to support library lending. And now inside of the OPDS spec is a great library lending mechanism, and it's there. So whether you're lending a licensed book, or you're lending a book under CDL, or you're lending it for some other purpose, purchase books that you're lending, and no matter how it's being lent, independent of the business model, those interoperability standards provide the users with a consistent user experience. And I think that's at the heart of this. That's what I'm really trying to do, is have the business models on one side, but hide as much of that complexity from the user as possible, and let the user have a consistent reading experience no matter how we acquired the material.
Right. And
right now we tend to expose the way we buy it to the way people use it, and that's not healthy.
Or, not necessarily the way, not only the way that it's bought, but also the way that it's sold. Publishers have a role in this as well, in that, you don't have to say, take all of your content and sell it through some large aggregator. But if you choose to sell it directly, you have to provide libraries the opportunity to do its own aggregation. The library provides a unified user experience.
Yeah, our challenge.
You just need to support it.
Yeah, in the public libraries, you can get 1 or 2 aggregators and kind of solve your problem. In the academic market, we have aggregators, which we absolutely need to be successful, but it just so happens we have dozens and dozens of them. so if we can get the aggregators to work with us, actually, that little thin veneer of delivery on the top, they can continue to do the work they do very well. De Gruyter can continue to aggregate and do all the work, the great work they're doing with university presses. Another aggregator might work with scientific and medical publishers, and that's okay. And yet at the same point, the user gets a consistent experience across these multiple aggregators. And I think that's, I think that's achievable.
Yeah. You talked a little while ago about the survey that you did, and Simply E. Question came in about faculty and their perceptions. Have the faculty been, how do they perceive it? How are they using it? And is there any meaningful difference between the student experience and the faculty experience?
We have not done a detailed user assessment of faculty just yet, and that is in fact on our agenda for this coming academic year. There's definitely a need for us to engage. I think when I think about the user experience for faculty and students, we know students are going to come to us with a phone and a laptop as their starting point. Faculty might come to us with the phone, but they might also come to us with a 25-inch display on their desk and a 13 or 15-inch laptop in their bag, as well as their phone. And so we have to think about going to where the faculty are and finding out exactly what they want to do. And that might be side by side with their ebook, with Microsoft Word or Google Docs, with EndNote or Zotero, working side by side. And we're going to have to do some work on assessment. I think we'll have more information about that probably in the next 12 months.
Mm-hmm. I'll end with one kind of vision question. As this ecosystem develops, and as Tom mentioned, like a 19-fold increase in ebook usage, kind of crazy. What happened to love of print? What are the long-term implications for research libraries, for the user experience? Where is this community headed in terms of the impact of the library, its relationship with vendors? Maybe if we get all of this standardized, where do we think things are headed?
Yeah, that's a great question. We love print at Columbia, just for the record, and we do work very hard to deliver a great print experience and store our books in an offsite book repository. So I'd like to say that, we're working to provide a great print book experience. And in many ways, it's never been better with the work that we do on discovery with Blacklight and our partners in discovery, fulfillment, and reading. We're trying to do the same thing for ebooks, right? It's not to say one or the other, but yes, make them both great. I heard some of this earlier today, and I think Christina really mentioned it, and Tom talked about it. Data interoperability is a great near-term opportunity. For example, OPDS, the Open Publication Distribution System, is already an existing interoperable format. It has been adopted by public library vendors and public libraries already. ProQuest now generates the OPDS data feed for NYU and for Columbia. Michigan Press and the work at Fulcrum, they're now generating it for the ACLS Humanities ebooks. So adopting OPDS could benefit the entire ebook market, because built into that, it provides the metadata about lending. Is the book going to be 1 book, 2 book, 3 book? It's in the metadata. So the more you can take some of these things that are business models and encode it in metadata, the more you can consume it with trusted servers and trusted systems and deliver it. So for me, if I had to look at one opportunity, is data interoperability, and I would start with things like OPDS. The second thing I would say, and I've talked to a few colleagues, including Brian O'Leary at the Book Industry Study Group, is to review and, where possible, standardize the business models themselves. Right? So you could look at a brochure from Overdrive, or you could look at a brochure from a ProQuest and a brochure from Taylor & Francis, and they'll tell you how they have different business models to acquire content. And Jenny mentioned licensing. I'd like to say that purchasing and licensing are going to probably coexist, and the technology system has to support both. Even though we as a library might want to choose purchasing over licensing where possible, we have to live within the world we're in. But to document in a standard way those business models in order to make it easier to connect the ebook systems to each other, to connect the back-end ebook systems and the way we buy things to the actual ebook reading. So we can, once we document the business models and annotate it, and we can then hide it from the users. So we can give the user the experience and then hide everything else from them. So just documenting what are those standard business models that people might choose to use and get some consistency between libraries and vendors could be very helpful. And then finally, if I pick one other opportunity, is to really try to advance collectively the EPUB standard. Because I think when you talk about equitable access, accessibility, supporting the entire community, it already has internationalizations, it already has support for accessibility, it already has support for searching, annotation and citation management, to be able to extend, to adopt and expand and extend the actual data format for the book itself. And EPUB as being that format would be something that I would think is a great opportunity for collaboration between publishers and libraries. I can go on, but I've had to pick three. I always like three, I pick those three.
Those are good three, good three. You hit on accessibility, licensing, usage, and data interoperability. You kind of summed up a year's worth of NISO work.
Let's go.
All right, well, Rob, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic conversation.